Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? So when the NFL draft comes, there are going to be 32 players taken in round one. Miami has their first-round draft pick this year. They didn't a year ago. You remember there were only 31 players taken in round one. But there's going to be 32 players taken in round one. But how many of those players actually have a first-round grade? This may not be surprising to you. It might to some. It might not. I don't think necessarily that's the point of this. The point is, I think this year in particular could work very well to the Saints' benefit. Here's what I mean. So Matt Miller, who's a draft analyst over at ESPN, has a piece up right now where he says there are usually 15 or so, give or take, prospects in a given draft where there are actual prospects that have an actual first-round grade. Not that get taken in round one, but saying you have a first-round grade. This year, he's got 16. 16 players in the entire draft that he has given a first-round grade, meaning there are going to be 16 players taken in round one that don't have a first-round grade, according to Matt Miller, right? So, look, there are times, and I could argue, actually, that in past years where we've seen the Saints trade up, it kind of makes sense. Just think of it through this lens, right? If the Saints are sitting there at 18 or 22 or wherever they may be, right? And the Saints have 16 players with the first-round grade, and one of them is sitting on the board at 14, 15, whatever it may be, and they get aggressive to go up and get it, they say, well, I'd rather get a player who has a true first-round grade. So you trade up for Chris Olave. Okay. Now, it hadn't worked when you went up to get Marcus Davenport, or you went, look, now I could say, actually, Davenport, when he was healthy and on the field, was a really good player. He just was rarely healthy and on the field. Peyton Turner, obviously, has been a bust. But I think there's some merit to that, right? If you just think of it in that terms, well, if I'm going to use a first-round pick, I want a player that has a first-round grade. Well, you go up and get him, whatever. The reason I think this year is maybe impactful for the Saints specifically is where they sit at 14. Now, just mathematically, if there are 16 players, again, according to Matt Miller, the Saints board may look different, but if there's 16 players with a first-round grade and you have the 14th pick, you're going to get somebody with a first-round grade. But in this year in particular, I think you're more likely to get an even better player. I've said this before, and it's going to be one of my main theses going into this draft, but I'm just illustrating it the more and more evidence that we get. For example, Matt Miller has 3 quarterbacks that have a first-round grade. Caleb Williams, he says, is the number 1 player in the draft. Jaden Daniels, he says, is the number 5 player in the draft. Not the number 5 pick, the number 5 highest-rated player. And then Drake May, number 6. By the way, he has 0 running backs. 0 running backs with a first-round grade in this year's draft. But just think about that right there with the quarterbacks. So you've got 3 quarterbacks with a first-round grade. However, you're seeing a lot of mock drafts that have Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy, also going in round 1 before the Saints pick. So you're going to have at least 3, possibly 5 quarterbacks taken, possibly. At least 3, possibly 5, before the Saints pick. Well, what that means is if McCarthy and Nix come off the board, those are guys that don't have a first-round grade that could come off the board before the Saints, meaning an even better crop of talent with higher grades are going to push down to the Saints. You look at the receivers. Great receiver draft. I think we all know this. And this is where you're probably going to get if you're looking to draft a receiver, you're going to have great value throughout this draft. But he's got Marvin Harrison as the number 2 overall prospect, Malik Neighbors as the number 3 overall prospect in this draft at any position, And then Rome Odunze, the number 4 overall prospect at any position. By the way, the other receiver that they have with a first-round grade is Brian Thomas, who he says is the 16th best player overall. The one tight end is Brock Bowers. 3 offensive tackles, Joe Alt, Fashanu from Penn State, and Fuaga from Oregon State. No interior offensive linemen. Defensively, 2 edge rushers, Dallas Turner, Jared Verse. Byron Murphy from Texas, the only interior defensive tackle with a first-round grade. No first-round linebackers. 2 first-round cornerbacks, Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw, and then no safeties. So those are the 16 players that have a first-round grade, according to Matt Miller over at ESPN. So when I look at this, and my feeling has staunchly been that the Saints have got to go offense. Now, I think they're going to go best available, and if hypothetically the Saints say they feel Jared Verse is a top 10 player in the draft, and he's sitting there at 14, they may take him. And it would be hard to argue against that. It would be very hard to argue against getting an elite edge rusher when you've got an aging Cam Jordan, when you've got you paid a guy who you feel in Granderson who has really played well, but you drafted Isaiah Foskey and got 0 sacks out of him in a rookie year where he played in 10 games and was a healthy scratch a bunch. So it would be hard to say if you feel like there's an elite top 10 level player in the entire draft who's sitting there at 14, he's an edge rusher, you pull the trigger, I get it. But for me, my feeling more so on this is get me a starting left tackle, get me an elite wide receiver in a draft where there's a bunch of them, get me Brock Bowers, who might be a top 10 overall prospect in this draft, who might be sitting there at 14 because of the run that's going to go on at quarterback and at receiver. Like, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze are coming off the board before the Saints pick. The 3 quarterbacks are coming off the board before the Saints pick. That's 6 prospects, which means you got 8 more spots before you get to New Orleans. Like, are all 3 of those offensive linemen coming off the board? Are the 2 edge rushers coming off the board? Maybe. So, like, who's going to be there for you? I guess I continue to sort of feel like I've reinforced, this continues to me anyway, to reinforce that feeling that if the run comes at quarterback and receiver, and especially if McCarthy and Nix come off the board before the Saints pick, the Saints are going to have a steal in this draft. I think there is an equivalent to the Eagles getting Jalen Carter where they did last year, where everybody thought Jalen Carter was maybe the best overall prospect any position, but because some of the off-the-field stuff and questions people had about Jalen Carter, he drops down. The Eagles just absolutely steal him around 10. Like, there could be a situation where, I don't know if it's Joe Alt, but maybe it's Fashanu. A top 10 overall prospect, an elite left tackle who's sitting there at 14 for you. Okay, I'm in. Give me that guy. I just think it's one of those drafts where, as opposed to a draft where you don't have a bunch of quarterback needy teams in a really strong quarterback draft class where there might be a run and reach at other positions and maybe you feel like you have to be aggressive to go up and get somebody. I feel like, I know the Saints are always antsy and they want to move up, but this really feels like one of those drafts where you sit there at 14, there is going to be a top 10 caliber overall player in this draft sitting for you there at 14. And I hope it's an offensive tackle. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.